see the light. Time stands still while the sun goes round. Distant winds making silent sounds. Daylight waiting to come relieve the night. So let it shine, 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 shine on me. Let it shine, 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 shine on me. Nothing left where the footprints stand. Roads ahead under scarlet sand. Twilight reaching like angels through the sky. Feel my moment and breathe it in. Search for skies that begin and end. Close my eyes so I can't see the light. So let it shine, 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 shine on me. Let it shine, 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 shine on me. So let it shine, 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 shine on me. Let it shine, 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 shine on me. Yeah, let it shine, 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 shine on me. Let it shine, 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 shine on me.
Well, hello. We are back once again, Friday, May 1st, and it is time to read the Bible with me. Happy to see everybody here. Glad you are in here with me. We have got Michael saying, "Here, here." Shanda in the house saying that she is sad that we are done with John. Maybe we could do James. Not a bad idea. We might be able to do that. Henry saying, "What up, brother?" Dennis and Kathy here by phone, coming home from the Maynards. And Logan saying that we're there as well, which means it's Logan and Pastor Colleen. That's what we like to see y'all in here. I did get a little bit of a tidbit from Mom. She's not able to join live tonight because of prior obligations. However, she did read the Bible, and she read the book of John, and she sent me a little tidbit of insight that she had. I'm not even sure where she found it out. She didn't give me the reference, so as we're reading, I will see if I can't locate that, and then we will make mention of it. So that's kind of what we got. As far as what the future of Read the Bible with me looks like, I have no idea, but I do know that this has been fun. So the plan is that next week, Monday through Friday, we're still going to be doing Read the Bible with me. I will say, at least as far as next week goes, we will do it on both Facebook and YouTube for sure. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep playing around with Twitter or what have I got? Twitch. We'll see. I've just kind of been toying around with those platforms to see if they can gain any traction with some of the live video. We will see. I may not. I'm not quite sure, but I will say at least on YouTube and Facebook for sure. We'll plan on it all next week. Monday through Friday, 7 p.m., still reading through the Bible. I do not know what book we are going to start with. James is a good idea, and if I remember right, James has 5 chapters in it, so that would be kind of an easy one to do for next week. We might do that. If not, I've really been wanting to read through the book of Acts as well, so we may get there. I'm going to kind of look at a calendar and see what we've got, because I would like to plan this out for at least a few weeks here, just to kind of see what's going on and everything, at least while COVID-19 and some of the shelter-in-place stuff, or even just the social distancing is still going on. I'm going to keep bringing this stuff just as a way of connecting with you guys, a way of just giving you a little extra something throughout the evenings. So that's the plan. Logan says that Marvin is here too. So Marvin, good to see you. Even though I can't see you and you can see me, but that's good. You can hear me. I can hear myself. Shanda saying she's okay with Acts as well. So we'll get to it. James is like my favorite book in the Bible. I'm just trying to figure out if that works, because I'm also working on a James Bible study that I'm trying to put together as well. So it might work. I just got to figure out my schedule and whether or not it fits in. I don't want to stretch it out too much, but to be able to do it while I'm already doing it could be very enjoyable. I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get to that yet next week. So I got to figure out, again, on the calendar, when's that going to happen? How are we going to get that in place? That's the plan. So, are you guys ready to read the Bible? I am ready. So here we go. Gospel of John, chapter 21. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. Now this is how he did so. Simon Peter, Thomas, called Didymus, Nathanael, who was from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples of his were together. Simon Peter told them, "I am going fishing." "We will go with you," they replied. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. When it was already very early morning, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, "Children, you don't have any fish, do you?" They replied, "No." He told them, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they threw the net, and were not able to pull it in because of the large number of fish. Then Jesus, the disciple whom Jesus loved, said to Peter, "It is the Lord." So Simon Peter, when he heard that it was the Lord, tucked his outer garment, for he had nothing underneath it, and plunged into the sea. Meanwhile, the other disciples came with the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from land, only about 100 yards away. When they got out onto the beach, they saw a charcoal fire ready with a fish placed on it and bread. Jesus said, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught now." So Simon Peter went aboard and pulled the net to shore. It was full of large fish, 153. But although there were so many, the net was not torn. "Come, have breakfast," Jesus said. But none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. Now, this was now the 3rd time Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Then, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these do?" He replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus told him, "Feed my lambs." Jesus said a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus told him, "Shepherd my sheep." Jesus says a 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was distressed that Jesus asked him a 3rd time, "Do you love me?" and said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus replied, "Feed my sheep. I tell you the solemn truth. When you were young, you tied your clothes around you and went wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and others will tie you up and bring you to where you do not want to go." Now Jesus said this to indicate clearly what kind of death Peter was going to glorify God. After he said this, Jesus told Peter, "Follow me." Peter turned around and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. This was the disciple who had leaned back against Jesus' chest at the meal and asked, "Lord, who is the one who is going to betray you?" So when Peter saw him, he asked Jesus, "Lord, what about him?" Jesus replied, "If I want him to live until I come back, what concern is that of yours? You follow me." So the saying circulated among the brothers and sisters that this disciple was not going to die. But Jesus did not say to him that he was not going to die, but rather, "If I want him to live until I come back, what concern of that is it of yours?" This is the disciple who testifies about these things and has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. There are many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were written down, I suppose the whole world would not have room enough for the books that would be written. And there we have it. There we have John chapter 21, the final chapter in our Read the Bible through the Gospel of John. There were a few things that I saw that jumped off, probably because there have been a few sermons that I've preached through John chapter 21 as well. If you guys have got something that really leaped off the page right there for you, or any other questions, and it doesn't have to be just about chapter 21, anything that we covered through the book of John, now is the time to go ahead and ask while we are still here. I'm going to grab a sip of coffee, and I'm going to kind of share with you a couple of those things that stood out to me. Have I told you how much I love coffee? It is just so good. All right, let me look back up here. Let's see. Yeah, verse 7. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." So Simon Peter, when he heard that it was the Lord, tucked in his outer garment, for he had nothing on underneath it, and plunged into the sea. That right there. I mean, Peter's reaction, Peter's response, Peter's love that he has for Jesus when he realizes this is Jesus. He doesn't wait. I mean, they're in a boat, they've caught fish, he's got stuff that he's supposed to be doing, stuff that Jesus even told him, but he's got such a passion and a zeal about him that he just can't help it. He has to go launching himself into the sea, swimming ashore, while the rest of them are kind of taking the boat back and bringing in all the fish. Nope, not Peter. Peter's jumping headfirst in there, and he's going straight after him. I don't know if this was because, the last time they were trying to see Jesus, that John outran him, and he figured, hey, maybe at least I can outswim him this time, or if maybe it's just Peter, and Peter just being that zealous. To me, I see that. I see Peter doing something like that, plunging himself in. I'm like, man, do I have that type of passion for Jesus? That when I see him moving in a certain area and kind of calling me towards him, am I willing to just abandon whatever it is that I've got and just go in? To just dive headfirst into where he's at, to plunge in, as this New English translation says. Am I that way? It's something when I read that, it challenges me to think, is that the passion that I have for him? Am I willing to do that? If I'm being honest with myself, no, that's not the passion that I always have. You guys are seeing me because of this online ministry, and it took me a long time to finally jump in. Now, once I jumped in, no holding me back. But to get to that place of really just saying, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to go now. My human nature wants to weigh the cost. I want to figure out, okay, is it safe? How deep is it? How long is it going to take me to get there? Am I going to have enough energy? I want to know all of the details. And so this is something when I see Peter doing it, that it just challenges me. It challenges my faith, my passion for him. And am I willing to take risks like that? Next one that I saw was actually out of verse 16 here. And you kind of see it's this whole thing. It's about Peter's restoration, and there are a lot of different things you can look at. It's what, verse 15 down through, even say down through verse 17. I would say those 3 verses are kind of the most powerful ones of looking at this restoration. And to me, it's as simple. It can be as simple as just saying Peter denied him 3 times. Now Jesus is giving him the opportunity 3 times to make up for that and to be restored and to recognize that. There are a lot of different things, and you can look at some of the language that's in here. He's saying, feed my lambs, and then he's saying, shepherd my sheep, and then he's saying, feed my sheep. And so those are the 3 different things that he says there, feed my lambs, shepherd my sheep, feed my sheep. Depending on how you interpret that, how you see that, there's a lot of different variables. There's a lot of different ways. Me as a pastor, it's one that I see it from that pastoral perspective. I see it as one that, the lambs are the younger ones. The sheep are kind of the older ones. And so it's like, make sure that you're feeding them, make sure that you're taking care of them, shepherding, making sure that you're watching over all of them, and then making sure that you're feeding the older ones as well. And that's something that, as a pastor, which has been interpreted by some to be a under shepherd of the great shepherd, if that's what I'm doing, then it's shepherding his flock. It's looking out for his flock, understanding first and foremost, these are his. They're his. They belong to him. And he's just given me the honor and the responsibility to step in until he returns and do it as he would do it. And so there's a great responsibility of making sure, like the word of God, if that's what we're feasting on. We've talked about this, how man shall not live by bread alone, but every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. We saw earlier in the book of John where Jesus himself says that that's what he's feeding on. That's what is sustaining him. And if that's the case, and that's what we're to be feeding, well, then we need to make sure that we're feeding all of it, that it's a well-balanced diet. And so even like with some of this stuff that you see me doing here, there's some meat, but there's some milk. So there's stuff that's easy to digest and stuff that requires a little bit more to chew on. And that would be something that I think for all of us to be aware of as well. You may not be called into like the fivefold ministry like I am to be a pastor, but we are all called to ministry. The ministry of reconciliation, to bring people into a reconciled relationship with our Father. And what I often see is, with spouses especially, I'll see one spouse that has a little bit more spiritual maturity than the other spouse. And because one feels like they have more spiritual maturity, they're trying to dive into a lot of the weighty, meaty stuff. And then what they're really doing is they can wind up choking the other one out because they're not able to chew it up. And they think, well, I've got all of these teeth, I should be able to chew on the word, without realizing that sometimes you just need a little milk. And yes, here's one of those other things. I'll even bring this into a natural sense of milk and meat. Milk is good brain food. Meat is good muscle food. Meat will help you with the protein to really make those muscles strong, but man, that milk, that's good for your brain development. And so oftentimes we won't even as Christians have a well-balanced diet. And then we wind up getting into an error or an extreme because we're focused too much on the milk or too much on the meat. And we really need to be able to balance that. There's one of those thoughts. Throw that little nugget in there as well. Charles Nickens in the house. Charles, you are here. Good to see you. Glad that you are here as well. Shanda is saying, is the reference to sheep similar to the growth of a Christian? The way I see it, and definitely from that pastoral sense, I do think that it is. I think that that's a lot of what it talking. I mean, especially when he uses lamb and then sheep. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep, shepherd my sheep. If you've got lambs and sheep, what do you call them? Sheep. If you've just got lambs, lambs. If you've just got sheep, sheep. If you've got both, sheep. And so for me, that's kind of what he's doing. He's saying, hey, feed them, but also shepherd them. And then to shepherd them is really not only about feeding them, but it's also about protecting them. And so that's the thing. I mean, I often, if I'm looking as a pastor, one of the biggest illustrations and examples I see as a pastor is a shepherd. And so I go back to Psalm 23. And I think Psalm 23 is just a great illustration of a shepherd, and how that is, leading me beside the still waters, leading me into greener pasture. The rod and the staff, they protect me, understanding that a rod, as Proverbs also tells us, is a rod of correction. And then you think about that staff. And one of those things of the staff is not only to correct, but to help to guide. And if you do some of the study of shepherds and how they use that staff and they kind of place it down on the back of the sheep as they're coming through, and it separates the wool so they can see their skin, because you've got to be able to get close to them to actually see if they've got any deformities, if they've got any illness, any infirmities, things like that. And so there's all these different illustrations that can be brought in that. But for all of us, and we may sit there and think, well, am I really to be shepherd? Well, if you think about the apostle Peter right here, the apostle Peter, he was an apostle. And so he ran with that apostleship, not in a pastoral context. So in fivefold ministry, he wasn't a pastor, but yet he was still called to shepherd. And really all of us really all are called to shepherd. Mothers and fathers are first and foremost called to shepherd their children. Husbands are to not only shepherd the children, but also their wife, to be that head of the household, to be able to do that. And then we can sit there and think, if God has brought people to us to disciple, because he wants all of us to be disciples that make disciples, then we should be shepherding after those as well. And so we should not only be shepherding others, but we should also have a shepherd for ourselves. And that's where I see a lot of stuff in there, and thinking, for those that I call my shepherds, those that, it's my pastor, those individuals in my life, I want them to be able to help kind of steer me towards what type of food should I be feasting on? What in the Word of God is really vital for me in this time right now? But I also look to them to help protect me by maybe pointing out some of those things that I don't see, and things that they see. And a lot of that comes through messages that they're giving. And then some of it comes through just phone calls and text messages and asking like that. So yeah, the shepherding aspect, something that I would think, yes, I think it's the growth aspect of it, wanting them to be fed, wanting to help them grow. There's my long-winded tangent on that. There we go. Now, going down that path, let's go to this next one, and this is actually the reference that I guarantee my mom was referring to, because she had sent me a text message, and she said the one thing that I noticed, she didn't give me the verse reference, but she said, I'm paraphrasing, but Jesus told them to mind their own business. You look right there in verse 22. Verse 22 says, if I want him to live until I come back, what concern of that is yours? You follow me. So it's like, I mean, how many of us as Christians do that? We wind up acting like children, but he got that, but she gets that, but they're doing this. Why don't I get to do this? And well, if they can, why can't I? And Jesus is just like, I love that he pulls no punches. He's like, hey, okay, so I just told you, Peter, this is how you're going to die. And if I want John to live forever and never taste death, that's none of your business. It's my decision. I'm his Lord, not you. You're supposed to follow me. So don't be following what he's doing. Don't be following what I'm telling him to do. And this is something like here's just a marriage tip. You ready? For everybody, one of the best marriage tips I could ever give is found right here, and it's also found in 1 Thessalonians 4:11. You ready? Mind your own business. It's really that simple. It's funny because I see wives that will come to me and they're like, well, he's not being the man of God that God has called him to be. He's not being a husband like God has called him to be. Wives, you're a wife. You're not a husband. If God is speaking to husbands, he's not speaking to you. You have no idea what God is actually saying, and you're also not his God, so you can't tell him what to do. That's God's responsibility. You follow him as a wife. And I tell husbands the exact same thing. Well, she's not respecting me like a wife is supposed to respect me. Hey, husband, how do you know how a wife is supposed to act? Oh, you think because you read that Bible and you saw a verse that somehow you now understand what God is saying to somebody that isn't you? Sorry, you don't. The few that are in the opposite sex that do understand that are those that have been called and anointed by God to actually teach the word in that manner. And just for, example's sake, me and my wife, when she asks me something, I am quick to ask her, are you asking my advice as a husband or as pastor? Who are you talking to right now? Because I'll tell you, there are things that pastor can tell her that husband should never tell her. And so that not only applies in this type of a context of husbands and wives, but we see what Jesus is saying. It falls in with each of us as individuals as well. It's something that we need to be able to just mind your own business. So it's like, the church down the street, they're doing this and they're doing that. Well, who cares? If Jesus called them to do that, let them do that. Are we following Jesus and what he's called us to do? Well, I saw this other Christian and, when they hop online, they're posting this and they're posting that. And I wouldn't ever think of doing that. Well, maybe that's because God has never called you to ever think of doing that. You just follow him. Do what he has called you to do. It's the one simple thing that we all have so much problem with. Minding our own business. Depending on your translation, it actually might say mind your own affairs. And that's 1 Thessalonians 4:11. But I just love this, that Jesus is like, hey, if I want him to do this, what business of it is it yours? Why? What concern? How does that concern you? I already told you what I wanted you to do. I already told you, go feed my lambs, go shepherd my sheep, go feed my sheep. That's what I told you to do. You do that. You follow me in what I have told you to do specifically. And yes, there are general things that God has told all of us to do. But when it gets to specific things, focus on those specific things. If God's spoken specific things to an apostle, I'm not an apostle. I'm a pastor. I'm not going to try to do that for an apostle, and I'm not going to tell an apostle what they need to do. The same thing with an evangelist, the same thing with a teacher, the same thing with a prophet. You do you. You do what God has called you to do. I've got a difficult enough time just trying to obey what he's called me to do without having to worry about what he's called you to do. But here's Peter. Apparently having so much zeal makes you want to do things for other people as well. Or maybe it was just getting into a little bit of envy. So it's like, those are some of the things that really stood out to me. I love seeing this. I love the book of John. If you guys have got anything, I've got one more thing I want to share out of here. And then if you have anything else that you got that you want to put in, let me know. Now is the opportunity to go ahead and drop something in the comments. And if you don't, that's fine. You can send me a message later. But this one last one I want to pull up here. Here we are. There were many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were written down, I suppose the whole world wouldn't have enough room for the books that would be written. This is something I'm going to say to each and every Christian out there. Each and every Christian. We see different churches, different denominations, different flavors of Christianity doing different things. And a lot of times when they're doing things differently, they don't make sense to us because we have no experience in that. And sometimes it looks weird, sometimes it looks strange, sometimes it looks ridiculous. And we're sitting there and thinking, I've never read that in the Bible, so if it's not in the Bible, it just can't be true. No. Just because something is not in the Bible doesn't mean that it's not true. Doesn't mean that it's not real. You know something that is not in the Bible? Live streaming, cameras, cell phones, digital Bibles. The list goes on and on of all of these things that are not found in the Bible, and yet we know that they are real. What I'm talking about is the things that we will see Christians do in different Christian flavors, that I've seen it. You know, I fall in that charismatic, Pentecostal, word of faith type leanings with my ministry, my doctrine, and what I line up with. And yet I see a lot of stuff in our circles that is just downright strange, and I don't get it, and I question it, and I wonder about it, but I don't wonder too long. The one thing that I do is I first take a step back and I think, especially in John, we see this. Jesus is saying the things that he's doing are meant to glorify God. So for me, there may be many other things that were written down that we would never know. I don't know, maybe things like that are happening, crazy things that happen in the world today that we're uncertain about. Maybe they were happening back then. Maybe this is John saying, you know what? A lot of things happened. Many other things Jesus did. We just didn't have enough room to write it down. We gave you the highlights. To me, I just ask the simple question, is what is happening bringing God glory? If it's bringing God glory, it's probably from God. If it's not, it's probably not. And that's my default on things that I just don't understand. Will it glorify God? Will it honor him? And will it bring him glory? If it will, sweet. If it won't, ignore it. Just be done with it. So that's kind of one of those things that I see and I think about. If it glorifies him, awesome. That's what we want. We all want to glorify him, even if it's strange and even if it's weird. Even if it makes absolutely no sense to us. We know the scripture that God likes to use the spiritual things to confound the wise, to confuse human wisdom and understanding. And so I don't have to know it all. The only thing I have to know is if what we're doing and what's being done, is it glorifying God? And then I'm going to focus on what it is that he has actually called me to do. So that's what I got there. There was one, Charles Nickens had pulled this up, and I have no idea what we're about to get into, Charles, because that reference is escaping my mind right off the bat. And so without having any real prep, Charles is saying, I like telling Hebrews 5:11 to nosy people. Hebrews 5:11. Let's see. It says, on this topic, we have much to say, and it's difficult to explain since you have become sluggish in hearing. I don't know if that's the reference that you were necessarily going with, but you know what? That can be very appropriate too, because a lot of people, when it comes to not minding their own business, it's because they've just stopped listening. They've stopped listening to what it was that God was saying in the first place. So, yeah, good stuff there. And Chris Garcia hopping in with that is an excellent point. Well, thank you. I'm glad you agree. Hey, everybody, I am so glad that you are here. I'm glad that you hopped in. I'm glad that you were enjoying this. And like I said at the top of this, we're going to continue doing this next week. I don't know exactly what book and where we're going. I've enjoyed getting through the Gospel of John. Only took us 10 days to do it. And just a few minutes at a time. Not only reading through it, but then having a little bit of a discussion on it as well. So if you've got some suggestions for books of the Bible that you would like us to go to, you can go ahead and let me know. You can catch me pretty much on any of the social platforms at Joshua Verwers. I will be there. I'll be checking to see what we got, and I'll make sure that probably Monday morning on all the platforms, I'll let you know where we're heading and what we're going to do. But at least as far as all next week goes, Monday through Friday, 7 p.m., right here, you'll be able to read the Bible with me. So, that's what we've got. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. Shanda, I'm glad it's been a blessing to you. It's a little bit extra work for me, but I've enjoyed it personally, and it's blessed me as well. And knowing that it's blessing you guys, man, makes it so worth it. So that's what we've got. I'm going to let y'all go. I want y'all to stay blessed, enjoy God's best, and have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you later.